we do know that in kids and babies, food allergies like eggs and soy, milk, shellfish, peanuts are, 30 to 50% of the reason for their eczema. It's mainly food.
Okay, well, welcome to today's episode, California Babies CB Greenhouse. Today we will be talking to Dr. Katie Hu is an assistant clinical professor of medicine of the David Geffen School of Medicine. She obtained her BA degrees in both political science and biology from Miami University of Ohio, and her MD from Washington University in St. Louis School of Medicine. She completed her internship and residency at UCLA Department of Family Medicine in Santa Monica, California, as well as her 2-year fellowship in Integrative East-West Medicine at UCLA. And welcome, Dr. Hu, and thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
It's my pleasure. And today, you're a doctor and you're an MD, and you also practice integrative medicine, Chinese medicine. Today, I wanted to focus on eczema or eczema. However, how do you say it? Do you?
I usually say eczema as well.
Eczema, me too. And just because it seems like everybody today has some form of eczema, and it seems to be running rampant amongst children. And California Baby, we make products for eczema. We make over-the-counter creams and shampoos, but that is a topical, right? So that is something that just addresses the rash, but really the body is saying something, and this is your specialty. So I'd love to hear, number one, please just define what integrative medicine is and how you practice it, and then we can talk about your approach to eczema.
Well, integrative medicine, as we practice it at UCLA, is integrating evidence-based medicine or in alternative therapies in addition to current standard of care, which is, the Western medicine. And so ours is a little bit more unique at the Center for East-West Medicine because we're integrating, integrative medicine as well as Western medicine, as well as Chinese medicine specifically. So it's got a little bit more of the Eastern flair.
Oh, and I should say, just in the interest of full disclosure, you are my primary care doctor. Yes. And I have also had the honor to serve on the board of UCLA Santa Monica Hospital and on a subcommittee to promote integrative medicine.
Well, we're so glad to have you as our advocate and supporter. We need people like you to represent us and to advocate for integrative medicine, which is a rising field, right?
Well, and you know what I love about you? Let me just gush about you a little bit, because and just going back, because I have, for the last 30 years, I have been practicing integrative medicine as a patient, not by choice, but because I had to. So I had, on my Rolodex, probably about 4 or 5 doctors that I would, cycle through. So I had an MD, and then I had a Chinese doctor who was also an MD. Then I had a homeopathic doctor who was also an MD, but he did homeopathy herbs. And then I had, an OBGYN who was, kind of conventional, but open to alternative. And then I had a pediatrician for my children who was an MD who was, kind of traditional, but open to alternative. So I had to do all of that work. I had to talk to this doctor, that doctor, piece it together, and then make my own decisions. And so when I first came to see you, I was so happy because you're all that in one person. You have it's balanced. So when I was seeing my doctors, I had to do my own interpretation, right? So here's the MD, and then I'd have to, listen to what he said and integrate it. But with to me, you seem like a new super doctor. You seem like you have all of that and you understand it. It is truly integrated. So you're not saying, wait, stop, let's talk conventional, let's talk, Chinese. It's all, you are all of that. So you are a super medical provider in my mind.
I mean, in my mind, I think I'm just a very flexible doctor, right? And so everybody is different. Everybody's priorities are different. Some patients opt more for the natural approach, the conservative approach, while other patients are so, their lives are so full and they're so busy that really they're like, I just need to feel better now. And that Western medicine, honestly, sometimes is easier for that. And so it's, a bridge, a temporary management. But in the long run, I still try to push for the more natural route, because ultimately that helps to prevent these symptoms or reduce symptoms and not just put a Band-Aid on it. And so yeah, it's more, having the integrative fellowship under my belt. It's just more tools and resources to help the patient kind of achieve the health that they want.
Mm-hmm. And the way I look at it is conventional medicine is very good at diagnosing and curing. So let's say, for instance, cancer, it's really good at finding out that you have cancer, chemotherapy, getting rid of it. But the Chinese way of the approach is to look at the whole person and find out, why did this happen? And let's, try not to let this happen again. And so maybe you can speak to that a little bit of the Chinese approach.
Yeah. I mean, Western medicine saves lives, no doubt. You break a hip, they will, put it back together. You have, really bad infection in your septic. It will save your life.
You want that.
Yes,
you want it when you need it.
Absolutely need that.
Yeah.
But Chinese medicine is looking deeper at the root or the why, right? Western medicine tells you what it is, but it doesn't necessarily tell you or explain why. Whereas Chinese medicine is getting to, where is it coming from? How do we rebalance the system? How do we use natural methods like our diet or our lifestyle to help modify and rebalance the system so that your symptoms don't come back, right? And from the cancer standpoint, it's the same. We use Western medicine. For my patients who have cancer, get your chemotherapy, but then at the same time, empower the patient to really look at what kind of imbalances may be creating or causing more of this inflammation that ends up leading to cancer. And how can we prevent it from coming back? Or how can we optimize your health during your treatment so that you can actually have the best chance of completing your chemotherapy course?
Yeah. And I think the key word there is empower. So once, I know for myself, I feel empowered if I can do something at home. So I believe in food heals, right? So I believe that if I can change my diet, or if I'm like an anti-inflammatory diet or whatever it is, that is empowering to me because I can do it at home in my kitchen. And I don't think a lot of people think that way. I think they're starting to change. Are you finding that people are and families are starting to change in the way that they look at disease or unwellness?
I think the ones that find me are typically the ones that have already gone down that road or started going down that road. I think in general, yes, there's more of an emphasis on wellness these days because there's just so much rampant cardiovascular disease, cancer rates are going up, autoimmune disease is going up. And patients, there's no reason for it except that we're not well as a country, right? We're not well as, we're not really focused on, we rely on our doctors to take care of us. And we don't actually put in the work or the effort to make sure that our body is optimized and working properly. When you have a car, you do maintenance so that it's, works well. Our body is not, it's the same thing. And it takes effort, time, and sometimes we kind of take it for granted. We take our
and it almost seems too simple. I think for people, we've been trained things need to be complicated, but really, it's kind of simple when you think about it, because optimizing your diet, optimizing sleep, stress reduction, which could mean exercise, meditation, talking, and that's free. That's basically free. And I feel like sometimes people think like, it's not going to work if I do that.
Yeah, no, but there's a lot growing research in the field of integrative medicine. And partly that is because of all the studies being geared towards cancer patients. How do we prevent cancer? And so there's growing research on, stress management and reducing inflammation that leads to cancer, or obesity, and its direct link to inflammation and cancer. And sleep, and how we've now learned that intermittent, frequent waking up in the middle of the night, that interrupted sleep can also increase inflammation in the body. And diet is huge, right? There's so many things that can inflame the body in the marketplace these days. It's almost a little scary.
It is. And my philosophy and my advice is, if it comes out of a bag, don't eat it, because it's been processed, and I know I'm in the manufacturing, I make creams, and sometimes I'll say to people, that ice cream has the same ingredient that I put in my lotion. So would you eat a lotion, even though it's food grade, but anything that goes through that's in a package that sits on the grocery store has to be shelf stable, and it can't grow bacteria. It has to probably be there for about 2 years. So you're not really eating food at that point. You're eating a product.
Right. And the preservatives that you're describing, they cause impurities in the body. Your body has to take it in and detox it, right? You have to be able to eliminate it. And if you eat a lot of foods that have those in it, you're adding stress, chemical metabolic stress to your body, and eventually it will wear down and burn out. And so then you accumulate these toxins and you accumulate these impurities in the system, and then it has to be released somewhere. And so that's actually, tied to eczema, and this eczema as a skin condition, your body's trying to eliminate these impurities.
Now, so that was my question. Is eczema an autoimmune disease or a symptom of inflammation, or both? What is eczema?
Eczema is an inflammation of the skin. It is not necessarily an autoimmune disease. I don't know that we are, at least I'm not a dermatologist, but I'm not aware that there's a specific antibody that is attacking necessarily your skin, but it is an inflammatory condition. And that's why the standard of care for medications that treat it is topical steroids, right? That's first line. Patient comes in, they've got some eczema on in between their elbows, or in between their knees, on their face. The first thing Western doctors would do is prescribe you a topical steroid.
But steroids, they work, and they almost work instantaneously, but it's not a long-term solution, right? I mean, in my experience, it stops working after. When I say my experience, I mean with customers, what I hear back from customers. They'll say, like, I tried steroids, it worked, and then it stopped working, and then it came roaring back. And then I also understand that it can thin the skin, can kind of permanently damage the skin. Yes. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So steroids are meant to be a temporary solution, right? It's meant to suppress the immune system and calm down the inflammation temporarily, but it's not meant to cure the eczema. Curing the
I
eczema.
don't think most people understand that. I think they use a topical steroid or any steroid for that matter, and now they're cured. And I'm not sure that it's explained to them, okay, we've given you a little bit of time to figure out what the problem is. And it's really is just right in your wheelhouse, because now you need to find the root cause of your body speaking to you in the form of a rash.
Yeah. And I think, that is where you have to dig really deep and kind of look into your lifestyle a little bit more. And from a Chinese medicine standpoint, eczema, you could be born with it. So it's nothing, the baby didn't have a lifestyle when they were born. It's a man, but
is it from the in the womb? Could it be a reflection of the mother and
the mother's diet? Yes, it could. But in the diet part gets really tricky. I mean, the mother could experiment for years or for a year, basically, when they're breastfeeding, to try to figure out what exactly they're eating that's causing the inflammation in the baby's skin. But it's really tough. I mean, it's sometimes when one food will trigger it, and sometimes another day in a different ecosystem or environment, it may not cause the same symptoms. So it's really tough. But we do know that in kids and babies, food allergies like eggs and soy, milk, shellfish, peanuts are 30 to 50% of the reason for their eczema. It's mainly food, and that ties together the digestive system and the respiratory system, which is really interesting for me because, this is very Chinese medicine, where there are, in the 5-element theory, this is like fundamental Chinese medicine, the lungs and the large intestines are paired. And so this pair creates skin manifestations, and the skin is a manifestation of these. And that's why skin conditions are highly associated with respiratory issues like allergies, like asthma, as well as with large intestine conditions like inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease, there's often a skin condition that's associated with it as well.
That's interesting. How are they connected? Because they seem like two totally different functions in the body. To me, what does the large intestine do? What is its purpose?
The large intestine's purpose, from a Western medicine standpoint, helps you eliminate. Right. Helps you eliminate. It's the stool. It's where the stool. Right. And so there is an elimination issue oftentimes with people who have eczema. Actually, constipation is one of the most common,
and that goes back to food, because they probably aren't eating enough fiber or vegetables. It's, again, we go talking about,
not able to eliminate, right, the impurities again. And so it has to come out somehow. So it's coming out through the skin. And so Chinese medicine uses eczema or any rash as a sign that it's a sign that your body's maybe not balanced, and there's something underlying that is imbalanced, and you need to kind of work to figure out what that is.
Let's say you had eczema yourself. Or your child, what would be one of the first things that you would do?
Well, my kids do have eczema.
Oh, they do.
Okay. They do. Okay. And
have they had it all their lives, or is it, because I know it comes, it goes. I know children can outgrow it. All of a sudden it just disappears. You don't know why.
What we found out with my girls is it's what I was eating, because before 6 months,
breastfeeding at that time.
It was always what I was eating.
Okay.
For me, it was anytime I had dairy, anytime I had citrus, and eggs. Those were the triggers for them.
Did you know that, or how long did that take for you to find out?
A long time.
A long
And
time.
it's very frustrating.
Yes.
It's a difficult process to kind of eliminate those foods. And so I eventually, the second one was a lot easier because I had already known
Yeah.
after going through the first one.
Did you keep a food log and then do a process of elimination reintroducing, or did you?
No, I was too busy. I did. Ideally, yes, you would. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really the diligent way of doing it.
Well, that's what we suggest to customers, so we sell the topical, just as you said, the symptomatic kind of management there to relieve the dryness and create a barrier. But I always say to our customers that, eczema is deeper. You have to find out. And it's going to take a little bit of investigation. And the first thing to do is to keep a food log, and then, out of process of elimination, reintroduce it. And I think my theory is that a lot of the foods that you actually love are the foods that are probably causing the problem. Does Chinese medicine believe that too, or what is the
Absolutely. The foods that taste the best are always the foods that, are. So there's three factors. Before I go into that, I just also want to say it's not always the mother. I hate to add mom
right.
guilt.
We don't want to blame the mother, of course.
It's not because
also, not all women breastfeed. So we could blame the formula.
We can also blame genetics because that it doesn't have a factor. So my kids, they're in Western medicine. There's a diagnosis called atopy or atopy, and that is that asthma, allergies, and eczema are all related. It's in the same family. It can affect different parts of the body. And my husband has asthma. And so genetically, they're going to be predisposed to having this type of inflammatory issue as well. So, part of it was also, I think, I tried my best, but at the same time, I'm fighting genetics, which is also, impossible.
Well, and then, if he has asthma or if you have allergies and, we live in Los Angeles, and I don't know about you, but it seems like something's blooming every day, year round.
We have the Santa Ana winds.
And the winds, and we're not even talking of the blowers and all the other things that, that happen. And I usually will have, some kind of allergy, to that. So,
yes. So I was going to explain a little bit from the Chinese medicine.
Oh, yes, please.
The three underlying factors. So we already talked about the first factor, which is that we call that dampness, or these impurities that need to come out, right?
Okay.
And so the diet is a huge factor of this. And dampness can be explained as that moist, oozing, the stuff that's trying to come out of the skin. And we can eliminate this dampness by changing our diet significantly. And the first thing
is dampness also heat, because I'm trying to understand the Chinese medicine, because I hear dampness and then I hear it's you have to be an expert in a way to understand. What does dampness mean?
Dampness means there's impurities.
Impurities, okay.
And it's not heat. Heat is separate. Heat is another factor underlying eczema, but it's not dampness. Dampness is a little bit separate. So somebody, for example, who has more dampness in the body would be somebody who feels sluggish. Sometimes their mind isn't as
poor elimination.
Yes.
And buildup of the toxins.
Yes. And then, foods that contribute to this would be, the kind of heavy foods like dairy, kind of mucousy phlegm type building foods like fatty foods, fried foods, lots of sugar.
I think sugar plays a huge role in a lot of, ill health, especially in this country. I mean, it seems like sugar is in everything.
Yes, unfortunately.
Right. I mean, you have to actively look to avoid sugar, and here's something that's really interesting. And this is a little bit off subject, but I've been doing research on honeybees. Mm-hmm. And here's something that was really surprising to me is that, so honeybees go out and they take the nectar from flowers and plants, right? This is how we see it. Mm-hmm. But when people do make honey commercially, they're feeding the honeybees sugar water. So the honeybee will store that, and it's basically high fructose corn syrup. So that honey is really basically a Coca-Cola, if you think about it.
Wow.
Because that's how some companies do that commercially. So here you think you're going to get honey because it has all these immune properties and, all the great things that you read about it. But in fact, if you really don't know your supplier, that's just pure sugar. It's not even honey.
Right.
Isn't that just like shocking?
It's shocking, and at the same time, it's not. It's capitalism, right? It's how we make things simpler, faster, easier. The food that we eat, so much of that is even if you buy a vegetable these days, you really wonder how clean it is, and the meat that you buy, you really wonder what they're being fed. I had the privilege of being at a farm last weekend. We learned so much about food and what to feed animals, and why there's such a difference between the meat that we ate from the farm versus the kind that we buy at the supermarket. It just tastes completely different.
Right. And it's much more nutritious. And that's why I shop at the farmer's market. I only get my food at the farmer's market, and from farmers that I know, farmers that I can actually visit, and locally and seasonally. I think that's the other thing. I mean, we're kind of veering off into just food topics, but, we shouldn't have blueberries year round when the season is very short. Our bodies are not they're meant to eat, maybe gorge on the blueberries during that, 4 to 6 week period when they're growing, but then we don't have them again for another year. So how do you deal with that as a doctor? Because that's a lot of education as well that you have to talk to your patients about, and it must be kind of a slow process.
I actually generally recommend exactly what you said, is to eat in season, right? Those are the most natural, and also they taste better when they're in season.
Yeah.
Berries during the winter do not taste.
No, it's just cardboard. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's hard. People are busy, and not everyone, unfortunately, has the privilege of being able to afford even these, more organic or more.
But, I find that, and I know that that's always an argument, but I find that when you eat really naturally and seasonally, it's actually it's not that expensive. I know the marketers say everything. Like if you go to Whole Foods, yes. But if you go to your local farmer's market, they don't have that, 6-time markup, and all of that. So it's actually cheaper. And if you eat simpler foods like lentils and beans, I mean, there's $5 for a bag of the lentils, and the nutrition that's packed into that is just phenomenal.
Yep. And on that note, one of my favorite foods to feed my daughters, because of their eczema, now it's more their eczema is flared up during the seasons,
like the winter season mainly.
Winter season, or in the springtime or fall when it's really windy outside and there's a lot of pollen or allergies in general.
Okay.
And so, or when it gets really dry and, their skin kind of dries out. So one of my favorite things is mung bean and barley tea. So they go to school with barley tea every day. And I'm sure their friends and their teachers like, what is this mother doing? But they get barley tea and they drink it almost more than water. I find barley tea hydrating. It's cooling. And it's also, it's actually has properties that help to detox the body. It's a diuretic and it helps to cleanse the system. And in Asia, with all Asian women in Japanese culture, Korean culture, Chinese culture, drink this barley tea because it's so good for the skin. It's actually traditionally known to help the skin.
Let's stay there for a second, because I did learn about barley from you. I had eaten mung beans, and they're an acquired taste, but I love them. And so I did make a traditional Chinese soup that you gave me, kind of the components for, and it included barley. And so the grains that I eat now primarily is barley, but barley tea. So barley is the way I eat it. It's a grain. It's like a rice. It looks like a rice, but right. And then, but do you make the tea from that, or I don't know how to do barley tea.
So barley tea you can like pan fry or roast barley.
So you take the whole bean. Let's say you go to the store and you buy a bag of barley.
And then you kind of stir, they almost call it stir fry, or just kind of the heat helps
toast it. You toast it. So you don't put any oil or anything. You just put it, let's say, in a cast iron. What I would do is I would take my cast iron pan out like you would with spices. So you just take that and you toast that. Is that what you do?
Just toast it. Yeah, you just toast it. And then afterwards that the heat helps to open up the flavor, right?
Until it becomes fragrant. Like when do you know when to stop?
When you smell it.
You smell it, then you're done.
And then you're done. And then you can put it aside. And then anytime that you want some barley tea, you take, a little scoop, and then you put boiling water over it and you let it steep. And then,
a scoop, you mean like a tablespoon? Let's say maybe you take a tablespoon.
Yeah, like a tablespoon.
Okay. Like let's say the way I would do it is I would probably put it in a thermos. I like to make my tea. Or I would boil it, but let's say, for instance, you have to strain that out eventually, right? Or you would eat that at the end?
You don't eat it, no. You can buy one of those bottles that have the filter
strainer.
That way it doesn't come out.
Got it.
But there's tea bags that have pure barley. It's not ground, and they're organic. And as long as, again, you find that it's a reputable company that you trust, you can do it that way too, and just use the tea bags.
But you could leave it whole. You don't have to crush it or anything. So you could. How long do you let it sit in the hot? You boil the water. You put the barley. Would you just turn the pot off and let it sit for a bit?
Okay. You let it sit until it cools off a little bit. So after about 15 minutes, it's ready.
And it's ready. You don't have to do anything more elaborate than that.
I think the most telling sign is the liquid turns like a golden color, or like a slightly light brown color. And then you know that it's ready.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to add that to my drinks regimen, because my regimen, this is my regimen in the morning. And I know you told me to stop drinking coffee and to go to green tea. Now I added green tea to my coffee. See, so I'm kind of halfway there.
You're balancing the heat and the cool, right?
Yes,
you're making it so that it's not so warming. Yes.
Right, exactly. So I did that. And then you also told me I needed more cooling, and I make a juice. It's actually a smoothie because I do it in the Vitamix. So I take whole celery ribs, whole aloe vera. I fillet the skin off, and then I'll put some cilantro, a little bit of cilantro and water, and then I blend that up, and then that's my drink after my coffee.
That's perfect. I mean, the cooling is actually the next step, right? So first you want to detox the body, and that's the dampness. And celery juice is dampness resolving. It helps to cleanse, right? All that fiber helps to cleanse the body.
So that's detoxing. So if parents, let's talk to parents, because I feel like parents, go crazy because, you feel helpless when you see your child, suffering. So they could give their child a celery drink in addition to barley tea?
Yes, like some form of green, that you could put some green apples just to make it slightly sweeter. You could put some carrots to make it sweeter, but then a lot of the green items you just mentioned helps to cool and also helps to cleanse the body. The cilantro, if they can handle it, but if not, parsley with the celery.
Mint? What about mint? I think mint would be nice for children.
Okay. Mint is fine as long as, again, it's kind of what they will take.
The main thing is the celery. And then if in Southern California, I always say to people and during the summertime, everybody should have an aloe vera plant in their home because those aloe. Sorry, they're so useful. Also, I think that people probably don't realize that aloe vera, you can ingest it But that's a step above, because it takes a little expertise to fillet that aloe vera. So then the next thing I do is I'll drink a bone broth, and I usually add turmeric and ginger and some seaweed into my bone broth. And then so now those are my liquids in the morning. So now I'm going to add the barley tea.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a very wholesome morning regimen, because the bone broth is then giving your body really good energy. And then with the seaweed and all that is really nourishing and for the gut. Mm-hmm. That also helps. The bone broth is actually extremely nourishing for the body. And so you wouldn't necessarily need to eat a lot if you were going to do your liquid routine.
Right. And also I think the bone broth helps for collagen and all of that, which sounds like it would be a good idea for the skin as well, for eczema. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So dampness was one thing. I wanted to mention there's another factor called wind.
Right.
Wind is it can be an external or it can be an internal issue. And so the external would be the environment, right? And so that's why the wind, the acute, wind changes in season, the springtime, the fall time, those are all wind prone seasons that can typically aggravate the.
What about the heater indoors? Does that, all of a sudden it's cold outside, so we're blasting the heater? Would that be considered that external?
Yes, that causes a lot of dryness. The heat. And dryness will also exacerbate eczema, because there's a component of dryness that's an issue, which is why a lot of moisturizing is such a key component to symptomatic management.
Right. And then I have read also that it's important that people who have eczema don't take hot showers or hot baths, because it sounds like for the same reason.
Yes, heat can be kind of more inflammatory. Or
is it because they're already hot? The body is already hot, mm-hmm. and you don't want to add to that?
Yeah, so heat is the third factor.
Okay.
But wind, there's the external wind, but then there's the internal wind. And internal wind, one of the major factors is stress. And I have had kids where I've tried everything. We've tried acupuncture, we try the supplements to help reduce inflammation, we try diet, we try everything. And at the end of the day, it was the stress. This acute stress that was really triggering this heat.
What kind of stress do children? I know we live in a very stressful world, mm-hmm. But are there things that you see, patterns that pop up for children?
To be honest, it's family dynamics. I mean, there's always issues of abuse, or the really ones that we are most often hear, but there's also family dynamics. Parents who are more type A and high achieving tend to have kids who have a little bit more anxiety, or
because they're picking up on that, they're just absorbing it and observing it.
Yeah, that, and also I think in the case that I'm thinking of, the divorce in the family, and the split, also can trigger a lot of acute stress. And, one other thing that sometimes it took me a while in this case to kind of realize it, but the parent was fixating on the eczema. It kind of defined this kid's life. And he felt so stressed anytime the father said, eat this, or put your lotion on, or don't wear that, or don't do that, because it meant everything was about his eczema.
Right,
and that fixation by the parent also caused the kid a lot of stress.
And how would a parent deal with that? How would you just ignore it? Or just kind of treat it as like, you're brushing your teeth. It's just something that you do during the day, but otherwise we kind of ignore it, or maybe empower the child to say, when you feel you need the cream, you apply it.
Yes, I think giving the kid, especially when they're adolescents and they're kind of becoming more of their own person,
Mm-hmm.
giving them a little bit of more independence around it and giving them a little bit of space. You kind of have to balance all these factors, and eczema is complicated for that reason. You have to balance all these factors and allow them to apply it. And sometimes just leaving it alone, it will also improve because that's less stress, that's less focused on it. When you fixate on something, it can cause a lot of anxiety over that condition as well. So then the kid's not thinking about it, not worried about it as much. It also gets a little better, right? It's kind of
like magic.
Yeah, it's a little bit like magic. So the internal wind is another factor. And then the last factor is the heat that you were describing.
Okay.
Heat comes from, stress as well. It can come from our diet. That's why we talked quite a bit about caffeine. Mm-hmm. It's not that I don't like coffee. It's just that it can cause a lot of heat in the body as well. It's a grown in.
And especially, as you say, if you're type A, I'm assuming a type A personality creates a lot of heat to begin with. Mm-hmm. They don't need any extra heat. And maybe the personality who's very cool and calm and detached, they can handle that.
Yeah, need a little caffeine.
They need a little bit of that caffeine. So it's interesting because now all of a sudden you're doing some self-analysis. You're kind of bringing it here back to yourself. Okay, who am I? What do I need? How do I balance myself?
Yeah, that's what we call your constitution, right? Everybody, this is why medicine needs to be individualized, because everybody is a little different in terms of how they were born, what is their personality, what is their baseline, hot, cold, excess type of issues. And we can use food to help to balance that out.
Right. Well, the cooling of food, for instance, I mean, again, if you just look at the seasons, summer gives us what? Cucumbers, which is, very cooling. And I think it's just so fascinating. It's really, how do you as a doctor get or encourage people to look inward and evaluate themselves? Because I think sometimes people, a lot of what they do is that they don't want to evaluate themselves. A lot of it is distraction. A lot of it, they're on their phone or they're watching TV or they're doing this because they don't want to really go inward. How do you encourage them to do that? I can't imagine it's very easy.
Well, this is where motivational interviewing skills come to hand. And so we do have a saying, and there's a lot of research in this, where if the patient's not ready, you really can't force them or make them, right? But if they have a reason, like a good purpose, and for example, I'll see like an older gentleman who's a grandpa and he's got a lot of pain, and for himself he doesn't have that much motivation, but his goal, for example, is to go on this photography trip with his grandson one last time. And then I will use that. Once I find that reason, that purpose, I kind of latch on, and then I use that to propel them to make modifications because usually for someone else, we will make those changes, but it's harder for us. And I see that in women a lot as well. We're willing to do anything for our family, our workplace, but when it comes to ourselves, we're always last. But if you can find a good purpose, give them that motivation, then you can spin it in a way that gives them that motivation.
And looking back, my children are older now, and looking back, if I could do it over again, I think I would have really worked to teach them how to meditate. Mm-hmm. And just because it's such a life skill, and it's hard, like learning a new language. Sometimes it's hard to learn how to meditate. I've learned how to meditate. I've gone to retreats, and with time it kicks in, and the body goes, okay, we're meditating now. But what a gift to give your child, so they just know automatically. And I think they probably do that at school a little bit, where it's like, okay, nap time, sit down time, relax time, quiet time. But the meditation, and even just a walking meditation, which is, which might be, it's really fascinating. Doing a walking meditation, I was kind of shocked, and I'm really into doing. I don't know why I'm blanking, but what the Chinese do,
Tai Chi.
Tai Chi.
Qigong.
Yeah, that's what I want to learn now. That's my big thing. I've started doing it a little bit, and wow, what a beautiful thing! It's a meditation. It's a movement. So that I think children would respond to as well, because especially little boys who love to move.
Yeah, I mean, Qigong and Tai Chi have been shown to help with so many conditions, with pain, with insomnia, with boosting your immune system, and anything that can help your system relax optimizes your body's ability to heal itself.
Right.
There's research on anything that is relaxing, like meditation or Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga. It helps to reduce inflammation. And so these practices that reduce your stress can directly affect your eczema.
Right. Because it allows your body to do the work of healing, right? And instead of
the environment to heal. Right. When the body is in a relaxed state, it heals at a much optimal level compared to when we're stressed. When we're stressed, our body's funneling energy to our brain, to our muscles, so that we can finish this stressful period. And this is where chronic stress becomes an issue. Because if you're always stressed, your body's constantly in this fight or flight, then the system starts to break down. It can't adapt continuously. And then it burns out. And then you've got it develops into all kinds of inflammatory disorders.
And so why do you think eczema can just disappear, or kids can just grow out of it? Is it, what happens there? They've just adapted, or I know it can come back again. I've talked to people who would say, I had eczema when I was a child, and I didn't have it. It went away now. And maybe it's coming back to what you're saying, stress. Now they're in the work world, or now they're whatever. So their eczema. Would you say that stress is really the number one thing that kind of triggers eczema?
I would say food and stress. Yes.
Food and stress.
Food and stress. Yeah. Food and poor lifestyle. Lifestyle that causes more inflammation. My mom is like a classic example of, someone who has chronic eczema on her skin. She's been on rounds and rounds of steroids, rounds and rounds of immunomodulator. It didn't work anymore. So then she changed to even stronger anti-inflammatory types of topical medication.
Did you talk to her? Did you have a little chat with her?
This was a long time ago. When I was young and I didn't.
Before you were a doctor.
This started before I became a doctor, and definitely before I became an integrative medicine doctor. But she just had this terrible lifestyle. She's always giving to others, taking care of her parents, my dad's parents, her kids. We had a habit of moving every few years. My dad's job just always took us somewhere else. And she was managing multiple households across 2 different continents.
That sounds stressful.
Yeah. And so she didn't eat the best. She sometimes skipped meals, and then she would eat what was convenient, which is packaged foods. Right? So eventually it comes out in her hands. And so now she's off, right? She had actually this crazy incident where she had a gallstone pancreatitis, and the inflammation from that nearly killed her. And after that, she took her health more seriously. She swims every day. She exercise. She does, Tai Chi. She does Qigong. We call the 8 brocades twice a day. She's eating mostly vegetarian foods, mostly from the farms, rather than from the marketplace. And
right.
She sleeps better. She takes some of the supplements that I recommend for sleep, and then she takes some supplements just for inflammation in general. And now, and then one very interesting thing that she does for her hands is she soaks her hands in honeysuckle.
Oh.
So she buys dried honeysuckle flowers.
Right.
And this is an herb in Chinese medicine that cools and also helps to dry and resolve dampness. And so in acute flares, it instantly, I've seen it. She does it here. She brings all these honeysuckle flowers that people usually drink as tea, but she just boils them and then makes a tea, lets it cool off a little, and soaks her hand in there. And then after about 10 minutes, her hand comes out and it's so much better automatically.
Well, that's funny. That's wonderful. We were talking about children, but, parents, and we talked about women and mothers and how women tend to give to others much more than they give to themselves or take care of themselves. And maybe they feel guilty. I'm kind of assuming that there's an equal trait in men. It might just manifest differently. I don't know how it does, but I do know that women tend to run themselves down. Yes. And so what are your thoughts on that and how they can reverse that?
Well, unfortunately, in my experience, it's usually something life-changing that then stimulates them to kind of look inward on how they can change. Sometimes it's cancer, sometimes it's, in my mom's case, like, she was in the ICU for a month, or they have a sudden diagnosis of autoimmune disease. And that's when they're really triggered to take a step back and look at their health from a holistic standpoint.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just do it, or teach our young girls, how to take care of themselves? I feel like it's talked about as a luxury, as if it was a luxury good, to take care of yourself versus, something that, I do a lot of self-care, and for me, I have to do that, and I remember you saying to me, you run really, really high. And if you didn't do all that self-care, I could probably be in the same situation as your mom.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's just that I think part of it is our culture, which is it's the emphasis on productivity, efficiency.
And our children too, as you were saying, children are stressed and now they have to learn everything by the time they're in kindergarten, at college level.
Life is fast these days. And so we're always playing catch up, especially when working mothers. That's, in the pandemic, it's come out even more, as kids are staying home and caregivers are now having to work and watch the kids. It's caused tremendous mental health issues in the country, and especially for women. And I think, unfortunately, that we just have too much on our plates, and there's too much expectation, and there's less help than there used to be. We're such mobile people these days that a lot of us don't have family close by. And, it does take a village sometimes to grow these families. And when we don't have the help, it's really tough on
But see, I find that's where food comes in. If you're optimized, I mean, because what you just said is very true. So how, instead of just saying, well, that's life, that's the way it is, I'll slow down someday. I have found that if you integrate that into your life, the food will help you with the stress. If you're eating properly and if you're exercising and you're, even sometimes just taking a nice bath, is relaxing.
Yeah, we talk about the 4 pillars of health, and it doesn't have to be expensive, right? We don't have to go spend $100 on yoga or get massages every week. It could be as simple as work to sleep 8 hours, right? Sleep is restorative. Sleep cures so many things. When we get COVID, every doctor is going to say sleep, right? That helps your body heal, recover, and have the energy to keep going. Sleep is really, really important. The second thing, other pillar of health, is work on the stress. And the stress, even if you don't have time, an hour to do Tai Chi or yoga, you can spend 2 minutes on a breathing exercise intermittently throughout the day. When my daughters used to scream in the back car seat as I'm driving home for 40 minutes, I can't do anything. That stress builds up, and I either yell at my husband when I get home to let it out, or I started doing my 4-7-8 breathing exercise, and that, in two minutes, I was okay. I'll just.
It's surprising how effective breathing is, and how resistant we are to doing it. Even myself, like sometimes if I have a hard time falling asleep, I realize, I should be breathing. And it's really just takes 5 up to 10 breaths. And it probably doesn't even last a minute, and then all of a sudden I'm relaxed. And and I always think after I do it, wow, that was so simple and so effective. Why didn't I do that? I mean, I think that's why you have to build it into a practice, because we forget. So I think that if it's a practice before you go to bed, or when you pick up your kids from school and they're, high energy, maybe doing that breathing before they get into the car might be helpful too.
Yeah, exactly. And so sleep, stress, exercise, we talk about exercise as a great way to address eczema as well, because bringing it back to that, when you sweat, your body cools down, right? When you sweat, your body reduces inflammation.
That's the first time I've heard that. So that's an interesting, that's something you could really do. So you want to exercise if you have eczema, and it sweats out basically the toxins. Is that what it, and it cools at the same time?
Exactly.
Great.
And so even if you don't have an hour to exercise, because the number one excuse I hear is I don't have time, right?
Yeah.
I have literally run down the street and run back, broken a sweat, and called it a day. Right?
Yeah. Or jumping jacks, right? You do, 25 jumping jacks, and then all of a sudden, and then you feel better too. And what a great thing to tell your kids, let's do some jumping jacks right now.
Yeah.
And it
or
doesn't
have stairs, run up and down the stairs.
Yeah. So that's a wonderful tip.
Yeah. And so exercise, and then your diet. So again, the diet is huge. And so if you just make tweaks a little bit to cool down the system, then you can prevent a lot of this accumulation that ends up to skin issues.
Okay. And that was the 5th one?
That was the 5th one. Yes.
Nice. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Well, maybe we'll end it on that. Thank you, Dr. Katie Hu, for talking to me today. I'd love to talk to you again about other things. I wanted to talk about eczema today simply because it's such a hot topic. But I would love to talk to you more about even just the Chinese approach to, medicine, because it's so new. It's new for me, even though I've been aware of it, but I'm taking a deep dive now with you.
Well, I'm always here to teach. I love explaining and teaching. I think it's knowledge is power, and it can be very empowering, especially when it's about health.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need it more now than ever to take control of our health, or at the very least, understand and not just hand it over to our physicians who, with the expectation that they just give us a pill and everything will be okay. And I think we understand now that that's not the case. I think that society as a whole is really ready for health and wellness. And I think what would you say? I mean, I think it's simple, but you also have to just stay with it. You can't, it's not a fad. It's not a diet. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. This is a lifestyle. This is work. This is continuous maintenance on our body to optimize. I mean, you can live 80 years long and you can have a very nice after you retire, it could be very fruitful and happy, or it could be actually very painful. And so if we're talking about investments, one of the major investments that you can do is on your own health and wellness and for your own future.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, that is what got me into the health and wellness world, because I want to grow old without pain. I want to grow old in a healthy manner. Because when I see, some of these people who are old and they're in such pain, they can barely walk. We're not even talking about, incontinence and all that other stuff. It's doesn't look like fun to me.
No, it's definitely not. Every day that I see patients, mostly because we do acupuncture at our center, I put the needles in as I'm doing it, I think 5 times a day I hear, "Don't get old." I'm like, well, you can't.
Oh, you say that to yourself?
No, they tell me, they're like, "Dr. Who, do not get old. It's terrible." And I'm like, it doesn't have to be. I have 90-year-olds. I have 90-year-olds that are loving life.
Yes.
They are fully functional, and it's because they take care of themselves.
And the thing that I love about the body is it's very forgiving. So when you make the change, your body, if it believes you that you really are making the lifestyle change, it's on board and it immediately wants to get healthy too.
Yeah. And there's studies on that, right? There's studies on middle-aged people who have high risk for cardiovascular disease or any kind of even cancer. And when they make those lifestyle changes that we talked about, the diet change to minimize obesity, they don't smoke, they don't drink too much, and they eat a generally healthy diet, they are able to reduce what they're genetically predisposed to by 50-70%.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's a very, like you said, forgiving and adaptable machine. But at the same time, it takes effort and maintenance. Otherwise, it will break down.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing what you do and being and help to educate your patients and also just the public in general. This is what we need, and this is what how we're going to improve as a society and be healthy.
I want to say thank you as well. I actually did a little research on in your website. I was looking at the ingredients in your eczema line, and everything that I looked up, it's the calendula, the aloe, everything makes sense from a Chinese medicine standpoint. Oh, nice. It cools, and it helps to moisturize, and it helps to dry. Some of the calendula not only helps to cool, but it also helps to dry some of those. It helps to move, we call it move the blood and cure the impurities. And so it does. Calendula, even in a Chinese medicine standpoint, can help to clear toxins, reduce inflammation, and cool the system down. So I think you developed this line almost perfectly for the symptomatic management of the eczema.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And I'm so happy that you checked those ingredients out and that you think that. And the one other thing is, I've always believed that the lavender also in our calendula cream is helpful for the calming aspect and the stress reduction, which I didn't realize until our conversation today. And I know that some of our customers will ask for a no fragrance version because they can't tolerate fragrance. And I've always thought, but the lavender is a big part of why that cream works well. We do offer a no fragrance version, but after talking to you, the stress reduction and how that helps eczema, I didn't realize that.
The lavender from a Chinese medicine standpoint also cools and dries. So not just the stress is an added bonus, but the lavender itself as an herb cools and dries. And so that helps with the dampness and the heat.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. And that's what I love about Chinese medicine is because it's been around for so long that it just, there's so much to learn, and it's so deep, and it's fascinating to me.
All right. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. I'll talk to you
soon.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.